All right, we want to see the outcome of that with our panelists, the AU Summit. A lot of issues were raised, and we've just discussed some of them also from the intro of, I've just mentioned some of them, I should say, on security, peace as well, and corruption. That was the theme that this particular summit was running under. And I would just want to hear from our panelists. We had Naomi Dama talking about corruption, which is endemic and has become now a topic also on the AU Summit as well. But we've had these conferences before, you know, anti-corruption conferences, even AU. I don't think this is the first time they're handling corruption. Are we just talking shop and doing nothing at all? Let's hear from Naomi Dama.
Debarl, this is a momentous time for AU, but particularly for African people. We cannot afford just to take out OAU and replace it by AU and think about no business as usual. Because you have to look at the issue of African people, African problem provided by African solution. Mm-hmm. And we can't do it when only 21% out of all states provide their 2% levy required to sustain African budget. We can't do it at Debarl when 73% of the AU budget is provided from outside, Europe and America.
Yes.
And therefore you cannot blame Europeans, you cannot blame Americans for calling us whatever the names they choose to call us, so long as we rely on them. And so the question of corruption is epidemic all over Africa. Okay? Leadership provided in Africa is a laughing stock for the rest of the world. We talk more than we do. Hopefully, what I saw coming out of this conference was the first time they are committed to launch the OAU flagship, which is a single transportation system for the entire continent, because it is easier for Francophone to travel to Europe than return to what you call Anglophone country, and Anglophone country doing the same thing. Africans are not trading with each other. African does not trust each other. We have problem with the articulation of higher education in Africa. How in the world do we expect to move as a continent and make substantive development? Mm-hmm. These are the questions we must deal with.
All right. Oh, those are questions we must deal with. That we can also comment on President Uhuru's attendance, and he also he actually held court with the Peace and Security Council of the AU, and he had legitimate concerns about the withdrawal of Somalia troops from the AU withdrawing the troops from Somalia. This is ill-timed, he says, and of course now this will also backtrack, you know, what we have actually been, or the gains that we've made so far as fighting terrorism is concerned in Somalia. First of all, I think the issue of Somalia and withdrawal of the troops, we've been there for almost 5 good years right now. Yes, and his concern, do you think they were valid? Peter Biarajak?
Well, I think he has a point, because if you have seen the contribution that AMISOM has made to Somalia has been quite significant. And it has managed to stabilize certain parts of Somalia. Of course, a lot of progress needs to be done. But if you look also, it was encouraging certain other bad behavior. Many countries were doing it for the purpose of getting money. I know, for example, the Burundians that are there, they make in 1 year money that normally, if you're in Burundi, it takes 12 years to make. So people were there thinking more about the money, not necessarily about the improving the security situation in Somalia. And I also think that the overall model that they are trying to approach has not really been delivering. So is a concern, but it goes back also to what Professor Naomi Dama is saying. Who's paying for the AMISOM to be in Somalia? Are African countries actually paying the resources that is required? I think that is not the case. But on the issue of anti-corruption that the AU has made to be its theme for this year,
yes,
this is really the problem that is facing Africa. If you look the amount of money that flows out of the country, this is what is draining Africa, because wealth is not being accumulated on the continent. people that are getting their wealth and getting it largely through illegal means are taking it overseas. This is really a real challenge. And I'm glad that the AU was able to talk about it, but I don't think they really discuss it in very frank terms. And then again, everything with the AU is usually about the talks. Over the last 2 years, they've been talking about leveraging the generational dividends, that Africa has a very youthful population, and they need to leverage this power of the youth to propel Africa to higher growth rates.
And we should enshrine
what did they do?
To the 2063 agenda as
and
well.
then, all of that. What did they do in the end? Nothing. They just talked about it, and then they left. And even this trade and regional integration thing that they discussed, the common market, I have little faith in it. Just us here in East African community. We are not even really implementing what we agree. South Sudan is a member of East African community. When I came yesterday, I had to pay visa at the airport. And we are supposed to be a common market where there is a free movement of goods and services. This is not happening. The same thing if you look at any protocol with COMESA or any of these things. No one is implementing them. And no one is propelling others to be implementing them. So in the end, it's just all about the talk. They come, they meet, they shake hands, and they take a lot of good pictures together, and they leave. However, though, I have to say, Paul Kagame of Rwanda is a serious guy. Definitely what he has done in Rwanda shows that he's very serious. But the question really, the post of the AU chairperson, that is a ceremonial position. He's not really going to be able to do anything that is meaningful. Maybe he can manage certain areas, especially when it comes to the issues of conflict. He may be able to inject more energy in than others have done in the past.
Yes.
But I wonder really what could he do. So it's good that the summit has happened. It always happens every year. But we are really struggling to see what comes out of that gathering.
So the issue is a follow-through. Who should be tasked, from all these statements they utter from, the podiums there? We don't seem to actually have maybe, should we say a secretariat that is making sure that we follow through some of these promises that are made so that most of them, they make good of these promises, Dr. Mustafa?
The African Union has structures that potentially can do follow-up on some of those issues that they discuss, but the problem is that they don't. Those structures don't work as they're supposed to be. Debarl, here's the point. AU can be as strong as or efficient as or working as the constitutive members, the countries that constitute the African Union. As long as most of the African countries that constitute the African Union is a joke, AU is going to remain as a joke. And I have had so many things that have been spoken at the AU General Assembly. I've attended a number of those General Assemblies. But believe me, the discussions going on, they are very good. They are very inspiring. But as soon as the assembly goes, halas, everything just, people go back to their cocoons. Now, because of these weaknesses, then what should the African Union do? It cannot pay its soldiers in Somalia. And this is why they want to withdraw. Yet we have countries in Africa, starting with the Democratic Republic of Congo, with 34 trillion worth of US dollars of resources underneath its soil, being sucked by China, France, US on daily basis. Ethiopia now supposedly has the largest gold deposits. Forget about that the gold is what ascertains the strength of the hard currencies and keeps them there. We have the real gold in Africa and many other places. We have to manage our resources better. The difference between Nigeria and Norway, for example, both have oil. Perhaps Nigeria has even more oil than Norway. The challenge is that Nigeria's oil is not managed well, yet Norway's resources are managed properly. What I would expect in this weakness that Africa has, and part of it, of course, we are the ones who are responsible for the mess. A little bit of that was caused because of where we came from, the slavery, colonialism, and all that. African Union should be serious about pursuing some of those countries that messed Africa. Israel today is still getting reparations because of the genocide that took place in Germany. The last genocide in 19th century saw between 8 and 12 million Congolese being killed by King Leopold II. We don't even know that there was genocide next door. Is AU helping DRC to pursue Belgium to pay? Instead, Belgium is in Congo sucking up everything from uranium to whatever they can lay their hands on. The first genocide in the 20th century was by Germans massacring half of the Hereros in Namibia. Do we even hear that Germans are going in there to try and help? No. It's because there is no even political will from the African leaders themselves to pursue those who plundered and committed acts of genocide on African soil. So there is no seriousness. And until when we are going to have serious leaders, then AU is going to work better.
All right, and of course we had, or you mentioned Israel. We had Benjamin Netanyahu when he was here seeking to be, included as an observer in the African Union as well. And of course we have all those ills that have not also been, rectified as well. Maybe you can comment a bit on the African Union Summit?
So it's been 20 years since the African Union has been set up. This particular summit probably had three important conversations. The first was really on South Sudan, and a resolution and a call by the AU chairperson, AUC, the Commission chairperson, Ambassador Faki, was that there should be sanctions against individuals that have prolonged this terrible violence that we've seen between 2013 and 2017. Mm-hmm. So that was the first statement, I think, that was important. The second one was really a conversation around the effectiveness of human rights institutions, the African Commission for Human People's Rights. And this one was kind of linked to a conversation that has been really part of the AU, I think, unfortunately, for several years now, which is the role of the International Criminal Court, ICC. And the heads of states were there present, basically censured the ICC for starting investigations into violence in Burundi. And also, I guess, they also condemned the South African court for their position that should Bashir, the president of Sudan, come into South Africa, the government of South Africa, by its law, would have to arrest him and hand him over to the ICC. Mm-hmm. So these were kind of like one set of conversations around human rights in Africa. And I think it's unfortunate that our leaders continue to focus on the ICC, but do not strengthen our own domestic human rights institutions that would make the ICC irrelevant. Why is it that we wait for the international community to sort out our business when actually we are closer to the problems that we see? So that was the second conversation. Mm-hmm. The third conversation was really there is now a new protocol on the rights of people with disabilities. And I think the first order of business for our new cabinet secretary, Monica Juma, and Ambassador Kamau will be to have this ratified and implemented as quickly as possible. So these were kind of the three big conversations that I took away from the summit. The one maybe just not that important, but it will cause a bit of interest in the readers, was the famous comment that I cannot repeat on air, even if we're off part of the system.
The toilet comment.
That one, flying toilets, that was thrown at us by Donald Trump.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just before the summit, he issued another statement saying that he thinks very highly of African countries. His Secretary of State will be traveling to Africa. But I was very glad to see that our leaders essentially sent back a very strong rebuke and said that this is unacceptable, and he should know that that statement was taken very badly by the continent.
But we had President Kagame holding court with Donald Trump.
He had a good meeting,
apparently. He had a good meeting, apparently, but he actually never asked Donald Trump to actually apologize on this, right? That was
maybe the strength in numbers when you're 50
yes.
heads of state.
Let's just listen in for that particular conversation they had with Donald Trump, briefly. And of course, also from that is AP Associated Press, we have them saying that the 55-nation African Union appears to have decided to react diplomatically and strategically to President Trump's alleged vulgar remarks about the continent. Rather than issuing an angry condemnation of Trump's reported comments in which he likened Africa to a filthy toilet, the African Union may decide to follow the advice of its new chairman, Rwandan President Paul Kagame, to deal with the US president as a leader of a country elected by his people. Kagame made the remarks, of course, on Monday as the annual summit, which was attended by more than 40 African leaders, drew to a close. Kagame spoke at the African Union after meeting Trump. This is last Friday in Davos. So in light of that, maybe let's hear from Peter Biara-Jack. First of all, that was a very good moment for Trump to apologize, instead of him sending letters and then promising that he will send the U.S. Secretary of State Tillerson to visit, various parts of the continent.
Well, I think, these kind of meetings, when they happened, there is a lot of discussion that happened behind the scene, where people discuss what is going to be discussed and then what information is going to be shared. And I'm sure if President Kagame had wanted to bring up that issue, it would have been the first thing that Trump would have said no. And if he had insisted, probably the meeting might not have taken place.
Yes.
And if he come and do it before it was agreed, and knowing Donald Trump a bit from what we have seen of him so far, the reactions would have been quite problematic for President Kagame and his own bilateral relationship with America. Not forgetting that Rwanda still depends enormously from financial support from many donors, including the US, and Trump has been very specific about cutting the amount that the US has spent on aid. So I think there President Kagame's hands were a bit tied. But I do agree with you that if you want to make a statement on this issue, this was the right forum, if it was something that it was felt to be offensive. And especially because Kagame knew in advance that he was the incoming chairman of the African Union. And he had a chance to meet with Trump. He should have insisted on this issue being discussed. So I am a bit disappointed that President Kagame was not strong enough to be able to bring that issue up and raise it directly in presence of Donald Trump. But then again, Donald Trump is very thick-skinned, and I think Paul Kagame is aware of that. So he was trying to navigate to ensure that the conversation are constructive and that the conversation continue to be helpful and that the U.S. will continue to support the African Union, including financially. So that is my reading of the meeting.
All right. Let's hear from Professor Nomidama very briefly.
Debarl, Africa will only be respected at the time we decide to put our house in order. A little country like South Korea is much more respected around the world. Taiwan, Singapore are respected. China is respected as a world power because of what it does internally and how it takes care of itself. And so I agree with Peter completely that shouting and screaming is not helpful at all because the person you are shouting at is the person you open your hands to help you the next day. And therefore, this has to be handled by the way we Africans handle ourselves. We have resources, how we manage those resources, how we engage with outside, how we commit to curtailing all the noise and nonsense that we talk about so that we can be looked at as people who are very serious as a group of countries in this continent. That is the only way the rest of the world will respect us.
All right. Dr. Mustafa, very briefly.
Yeah, Debarl, naturally, because of diplomatic etiquette, Kagame was not going to raise anything unpalatable in front of the cameras. These are issues that they cannot really raise. The fact that Trump, labeled Africa as as a shithole, this is not, African leaders should not go to the level where Trump is in terms of vulgarity, and it shows maturity. However, I expect that the African leaders and African countries to actually summon their ambassadors in all the capitals to explain what Trump meant by that particular vulgar remark.
Thank you. So Donald Trump signs the order to keep Guantanamo Bay Detention Center open. Maybe you can get remarks from our panelists as well from this development from the State of the Union this morning. Let's begin with you, Irungu.
So I think I'll start with the Alternative People's Summit as a conversation, I think, or the State of the Union address. And I think for me, one of the things that has been exciting about the United States of America is that we've seen really an outpouring of new organizing that's happened around things that are important to people in that country. So whether it be Black Lives Matter and Common very powerfully expressing the movement that has emerged, or the Me Too campaign, which has been really a moment, I think, quite remarkable. And many years from now, we'll remember this moment where people came out and talked about incidences of sexual harassment and intimidation that had been kept secret for many years. And Whoopi Goldberg's speech at the Golden Globes is probably one of the best speeches that I've heard this year so far. But even the women's rallies, the number of people that are now leaning forward to take up positions at local levels, means that what was essentially probably a lazy democracy under Barack Obama is now becoming much more vibrant as people begin to say, well, this is the type of country we want to create. So for me, that's the moment that I think America leans into.
Right. Let's hear from Norbert Debarl very briefly.
Debarl, in the history of United States over 200 years, whenever extremists take over, whether it's on the left or on the right, America always moved to the middle. America, based on the constitutional principle that values people's life, and Barack Obama provided that leadership. And so Trump can move away from that center. But am I expecting after Trump exists the podium, they are going to move right back in the middle?
Right. So Guantanamo Bay, it has been a very ticklish,
No, but it's significant, right? Because
to keep it open.
This has been a major campaign issue over the last 8 years, maybe even 12 years during the George Bush time. And Trump has spent a lot of time talking about it, saying that he's going to bring back torture and worse, and he's keeping his promise. He's keeping the Guantanamo Bay open. And if you read of the horrors that have taken place at that detention facilities, it just goes against every principles of human rights. And they show this double face of America, while they want to project this image of beacon of human rights and civility. You also see the real power, which is the real politics, where they will use whatever means necessary to ensure that they protect their country. So it's a significant event. Keeping the Guantanamo Bay open is a serious escalation. And I think it works both ways. Republicans are going to love it, but at the same time it's going to backfire with the same terrorists, because now they are going to show this very ugly face of America that Donald Trump is now embodying. And I think you will see all sort of different consequences that emerge out of this decision.
Right. Finally, let's hear from Dr. Mustafa.
Debarl, there is a global crisis of extremism that we are having to confront today. And in the past, 12, 15, 20 years ago, America has played some kind of a moderating role. And we saw Barack Obama really financing that. The US, the current administration, is moving from rather into the far right, if you like, extreme right. And so the world then is going to be faced by two forms of extremism: the non-state actor extremism that is taken out or epitomized by ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and the other terrorist groups, and then the state actor extremism that is now being epitomized by leaders who are on the far right. We are seeing in the US and in Europe.
All right, thank you.